At that point, they will be fighting to end, without knowing perhaps, to end the system that they control, because they are not interested in money. They are interested in your money.
Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. This is episode number 17, Bitcoin Cash in Argentina and the history of cryptocurrency. Today is Sunday, the 9th of May, 2021, following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. My name is Jeremy. I'm your host. I'm here with Marcelo. Marcelo, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, yeah. It's great to be here. I really like your show. I like this. It's long, relaxing, like just a conversation. I enjoy it very much, and I'm a big fan from the first one.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a long form type of thing. I think that's something that's really interesting is that I've had a few people say like, oh, what, you could make it shorter to make it a bit more accessible, cram it down into like half an hour or something like that. But I really don't want to do that because for me, I really, really like that it is that long in detailed. If I did it in half an hour, it would be like, oh, hello, here's the price. And then it would just be
Yeah.
like, one news segment, and then that would just be the end of the
Uh,
episode, right? So,
And you would get perhaps 100,000 views or a million, but it will not matter. And I'm sure that people that are interested in your kind of show is people that tend to matter most
yeah,
in the long
exactly.
run.
Exactly. It's really important to me. I think that you sort of, the more you can raise the education level, and it is a very big, cryptocurrency is very big, very complicated, and everything. So the more, yeah, the difference between the people who are at the fringe, it doesn't matter as much. But if you build a really strong core of people, well, then they educate more people, and it spreads out and around to everyone. So yeah, I think that if that detail is there, people can listen, and if it's not there, well, maybe they can just listen to some of it, or there'll be other ways to get quick news on
Yeah, yeah. The
crypto.
Yeah, the time marks are very very useful. I know it's not easy, but perhaps if you don't have a lot of time, you can go straight to where the place you are more interested in.
Yeah, timestamps. Yeah, I'll have to definitely put some more
Yeah,
of them on.
time
I've
taps.
on the videos. I've only done that recently. So yeah, just tell me. So how are you involved in cryptocurrency, or what are you in the scene? How long have you been involved? Like, give the listeners some background.
Well, as many people know, I live in Argentina, so it's difficult not to be interested in something, in some alternative currency,
Yeah.
because ours is so bad, and it's been so bad for such a long time that it's a perfect match, you know. So in Argentina, we have this uh, good fortune, in a way. Many Argentinians were interested in Bitcoin um, in the early days because we are always searching for alternatives. So in that way, we are fortunate. In another way, we are not so much because many people were how can I say this? They're burned by Bitcoin. They accepted it. They adopted it. They started to accept it. They started using it, and then people that were not following, the day-to-day struggles and wars and all the things, they just saw Bitcoin stopped working. So our work as promoters of peer-to-peer electronic cash was made more difficult. I mean, in since let's say 2016, 2017, we had to explain it all over again to people that that were not so keen. They were no. I know I've used it. It's a disaster. I don't want to know more about this. But so you have to explain. No, no. Look, this is how it used to be. This is how it's supposed to be. So it's difficult in that sense that many people. were had bad experiences. Started using it, and they they um, they thought that this was not scalable.
Mm.
I mean, so these guys, the new guys, the Blockstream guys, did it. I've seen it. If this was their plan, it worked like a charm.
Yeah. I mean, in English, they say like once burned, twice shy, right? Which is this sort of expression that
Exactly.
means, yeah, you try something out, and if it doesn't really work out for you, the second time when someone says, take a look at this, you're obviously going to think,
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know about that one, right? Like, and it's hard enough to get
yeah,
someone to
yeah.
try it one time in terms of
Yeah,
cryptocurrencies.
yeah,
So,
no, and then I've been there. Thank you very much.
yeah, and I think I mean it is an interesting way that it all sort of played out because in one sense, the whole community split and everything it was terrible. It obviously set adoption back. I would say maybe well we're seeing now maybe about 6 to 7 years right between about 2015 2016 to now 2021. I feel like we're starting to get sort of back to a similar place where we were in some respects. But now, in another way, I feel like there has been some benefit in that the two are now separated. And now, if anybody is in Bitcoin and they want to speculate and digital gold and whatever they want to do, they can just do that. And if they think, wait, I can't actually use this, and they start complaining about that, well, they just say to them, well, just go to Bitcoin Cash then, because that's what they're interested in. We're not interested in. And the same for us is that if we're doing Bitcoin Cash and we're trying to make a currency that people can trade and everything, and everybody's just interested in the banks or investment money or something like that, we can say, well, look, maybe just go check out Bitcoin. And once you get sick of that and you realize how we're going to change the world like that, you can kind of come back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In that sense, I'm thankful for the 2017 fork because many people, uh, I mean, it allowed us to discriminate
Mm,
who is here for the right reasons. Uh, if uh, if we had it later, it would have been worse, I think,
mm.
and which each year even worse. So I think it's okay. We are now again in the fight.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that that's a really an interesting point is that even I mean we will talk about this as well, but with the later forks as well in Bitcoin Cash, again it sort of slowed the momentum down in the short term, but I sort of see it as like it's like in Australia they have bushfires, right? And a lot of the plant life in Australia relies on those bushfires actually because it comes through and it cleans the slate of a lot of the old dead wood and so on and so forth. So I think in that sense, if there are sort of people forking off of Bitcoin Cash, and now that's become ingrained or it's part of the culture, is that if you want to make a really big substantial changes to Bitcoin Cash, people can just say, well, just make a fork then, and it doesn't need to be contentious because you can't really argue against that because that's what Bitcoin Cash did to begin with, and then that's what Bitcoin SV has done, that's what BCHA has done, and everybody's happy with that, right? Like you just provide the choice to the market, people can be in the community they want to be in, and the projects just carry on. So I think that's
Exactly.
really good.
It's decentralized governance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The market ultimately having the final say. All right, so yeah, well, obviously we always start with the price. This week, a good update for the irregular listeners, where Bitcoin Cash today was at $1,345. So that's up nearly 30. That's up, nearly 30 or 40% from the last episode that I did about a week ago. Very exciting this week where the price was just up and up from 900, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300. It went up to about 15 or $1,600 and has since come back off a bit. But to me, the important thing as well is that it has been rising against BTC. So it has now been in the range of, it's now 42 and a half BTC, BCH to 1 BTC, but it was as high as about 35 to 1 in this last week, and it seems like it's not dropped back off. So I see that as hugely important, much more important than the USD price is if we're gaining price against BTC.
Yeah, in a couple months ago, we were like one BTC more than 100 BCH. I think we're 115 or something.
Yeah, I think the low was about 118, maybe was the
Yep.
absolute low, and that was soon after I started this podcast. So I think I might have timed it perfectly, where I'm going to capture the entire run up from 118 to one,
Maybe.
and then people can listen to. I've had people who already have said that they were listening to the show. And one key point about it is that it is a history, and it means people who are new to crypto, a tough thing for them, I think, is understanding the history. And so, but now they can see it. They can look back, okay, 3 months ago and listen. And it's very different when you can look at the price graph and see that it was up and down, and it all looks very dramatic. But it's very easy to just ignore that. But then if you look back and you listen to the episode, and at that time, wow, the price was $400, or like that really clicks a bit more than just looking at the graph, and you can understand theoretically that, okay, once upon a time Bitcoin was 10 cents and now it's $50,000. But that's very different to being able to listen back in time to somebody talking about, wow, it's just hit 10 cents. So I think that, I really like that aspect to it too. And I hope, I'm sure a lot of people will get value out of it, because that's something you get naturally by attrition, by being in the space. But we can sort of provide that
Yeah.
in reverse, in a time capsule for people too. So I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, obviously every week we check in on the transactions. So last week the story was that Noise Cash had started batching up transactions, and therefore we massively plummeted in the number of transactions. But it seems like it is starting to level out in about the 110, 115,000 transactions range. So that can be maybe considered more our like real sort of
Yep.
transactions in one sense, with BTC up there at 200 and 50-ish thousand. Like, just talk to me about this entire rise. Have you been following the show? You would have been following the rise and
Yeah. Yeah.
fall and different
Yeah.
people.
I think we will be laughing at this in I don't know, in a couple of years or 5 years from now. The same way we laugh at the the big picture when you see the price in 2010, for example, and you see people in the forums talking about the price and talking about this is and saying things that you know, and worried about things that now it seems insane.
Yeah.
So I think this is the same. If it works, people will use it. People are looking for things that they can. I mean, people are looking for utility. This is something I've been watching here in Argentina. And I'm very glad that I met some guys that are like 20 years old. It's another generation. I found them not because they were not aware of the history. They were looking for something that just works, and they started from whatever coin, and it was not exactly what they needed, and there was no support. There was no community. So they ended up in Bitcoin Cash because they found it works. It was secure. It was all these all these properties, and then you had people interested, passionate about it. It's these guys are not. This is something that I mean. I'm 45 years old, so to me it was incredible seeing this how it works, how fast they are looking for community. They go into a Telegram group. You have I don't know, 50 people. Are they interested? Are they responding? Do they have something to add? And if not, let's move to the other one and the other one and the other one. So that way you realize that it's so easy to to fire up I don't know 1,000 trolls in Reddit or in Twitter, but to have these people, and I think this is related to the to being a split and not a fork, and not not an altcoin, not a new Genesis block. It's the same people. The same people, like for example Roger Ver. Because that mindset stays with the coin. So the reason I'm talking about this is because I see this as the most important thing. People using it, and you need the good properties of sound money, but you also need people using it. So I think this will happen, and this will, as it used to be, this will be reflected in economic value also. It's not a perfect match, but it used to be, the Metcalfe law.
Yeah.
Some guy made once a chart with the number of transactions and the value of Bitcoin when it was just one Bitcoin, BTC.
Yeah.
And it was perfect until they put this cap to adoption. So this is interesting. I think these new services are just the beginning. This is an experiment, but when people start using it and they start using it like every day, we will see. I hope we are ready for that, because it will be wild.
Yeah.
I mean, this number of transactions, we will be laughing. I think perhaps in a couple of years.
Yeah, 100,000 here or there. Yeah, what you're saying, like, people freaking out. Oh, the price went from $30 to $2, which at the time you can think that was massive. But then if you think in the context of $50,000, well, if you were buying, you were killing it, and it's going to be the same.
Yeah, I remember there was a meme of a guy with this stupid face, and he was saying, "I bought at 32," and the meme. The funny thing is that it said early adopter, and it was like, yeah, I'm an early adopter, but I'm late to the party, because then it went from 32 to $2. So people at this guy. And this is the story. It repeats itself, I think.
Yeah, Bitcoiners tend to get the last laugh. It's just they have to wait. They have to wait for it.
Exactly.
And that's what I think.
It's always the short-sighted people versus the long-term oriented people. I think this goes all through history, and perhaps from the first time in history, people that can think and be patient are rewarded. I mean, it's not the first time in history, but at least in this realm.
Yeah, in this generation, yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, I mean, as you're saying as well, too, like, I'm not, super worried whether the transactions are up or down a little bit, because, like we're saying, the most important thing is the utility, and we have been seeing that exploding in this last week. In the episode last week, I talked about it was the first time that BCH had done more US dollars sent over the network as compared to BTC, and then it has been, massively up for both BTC and for BCH. But for BTC, it's just, part of the trend. But for BCH, it has rocketed up. And then just yesterday, it was set a second day where it was 27 billion to 25 billion for BTC. So even though the price, like we saw, is 40 to 1, which makes it even more incredible, really, because if the price was 1 to 1 and there was more utility going on BCH, well, that would tell a big story. But
exactly,
on top of that, if you think about if there's BCH is 40 to 1, that means there's 40 times as less amount of money, even that could be sent around, right? So it's really
it's not it's not a perfect indicator, but I think it's the best we have. It's enough.
Yeah, definitely. It has some flaws of people criticizing. Oh, well,
Yeah,
if you look at one big holder can spend a big amount and they're just giving change back to themselves, and so then it looks like there's a
yeah,
lot of utility and all that. But I mean, even so, like, firstly, that is also true of BTC, and more true of BTC
exactly.
because the fees are higher. So people want to make big transactions instead of small ones. So it would be more true for them. And then once you factor that in, I mean, this chart is still going up, even if it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
big
yeah,
holders getting very excited and sending around a lot of their coins.
yeah,
That's still
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
weren't doing that in the past. So I
yeah,
think
yeah.
this is absolutely massive, and I think my prediction was back here, a couple of months back that we would see BCH overtake BTC on this metric, and now that's coming true, and I think it will just become the standard, and probably in 2 weeks or a month or 3 months, whatever, it will be just BCH will really just start crushing BTC in the amount of actual
Yeah, 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 yeah.
commerce
People
flow.
don't understand that you cannot have a kind of money, I mean, in a digital age, that just work for one thing and not for the other. That's a model that it's no longer necessary. I mean, people also, I've heard some people say, no, but the business to business is so big that this doesn't matter. But look, business to business, they are dealing today in what? In fiat, in dollars. Why? Because they can use it for other things. I don't know, to pay their employees, for example. So it's when you try to make this arbitrary distinctions today. It's I think it's inevitable. I mean, it's economic forces at play. You cannot stop that. I think. I think that they thought they could because they are used to thinking that money is a monopoly, and they can do the same to the dollar, the peso, whatever, the same to Bitcoin. And I think that they are finding out that it's not that easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. And just it's a like you're saying with Metcalfe's law, it's exponential. In fact, it's probably even faster than exponential in terms of the benefit, because as more commerce flows onto BCH, that increases the draw for more commerce and more, and so the funnel gets
Exactly.
wider and wider as the kind of volume coming in also gets
Yeah.
wider, and
Yeah. And the floor,
yeah.
also the floor is higher because people are using it. They need it. They demand for more things. So you don't have this speculation frenzy where people freak out and they all sell because they are not using it. They don't need it. They are just speculating, which is fine. But if that's everything, you are in trouble.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's been fascinating. So we've got a couple of quick points of the news. So I saw one thing this week was this guy, Kaniak, his name's Matthias, and he's been streaming a lot about Bitcoin Cash, and he's spreading adoption in Canada. And he got his car sort of, I don't know what you call this, decaled, or he got it like painted a little bit with the Bitcoin Cash, like like along the whole side door with his name and his phone number and a website for people to go to. And so now everywhere he's going to be driving around town, everybody's going to be saying, hey, Bitcoin Cash, just passive advertising. And I really wanted to highlight this because I have my theory, right, of proof of passion, that the main things that increase the value in a coin obviously is utility, right? But the sort of the precursor to that is that people are passionate, and that it really, to advertise, like you were saying, you can have a lot of Twitter trolls or whatever, but everybody knows that's very easy to just manufacture out of nowhere. But things
Yeah.
like putting it on your car to drive around with, people will see that, and I mean, people will already do that with their different businesses and so on and so forth, but that's not something you do lightly. If you're prepared to get your car actually painted, this is, you're serious. You're not,
It's
he's not going to be changing
it's
to
this is a
Dogecoin
signal.
next week, right? Because he's not going to get his car
Yeah.
repainted every week. So it's Bitcoin Cash, like, that's the one. And I love that.
Yeah,
So
I love this guy, Cain. I didn't know his name, but I I met him for the first time at yours. Do you remember this platform? It was like before Read
For the
Cash.
split, yeah.
They went the SP route then, but he was writing there. He's very talented. He's a musician. He writes, and he's very smart. And I started reading some book from him. A book he was writing on the fly, and you had to pay to see the whole chapter. And I went through the whole book.
Wow.
I think that I was the only one reading it because it was the beginning of this platform. But I think people like this are very important. I mean, you cannot have Bitcoin. Bitcoin wouldn't have survived without people, for example, like Roger Ver. And people can't. You cannot buy a guy like Roger Ver,
Yeah,
even if
exactly.
he's not rich. Even before he's not on sale. So that's the most important. And many people that are not that way don't see it. They can't see it coming. They just dismiss it. They think that, and I've been unpleasantly surprised by many people, even here in Argentina also, that once they got the money they wanted to be, I don't know, comfortable, they just forgot about everything else. And I can't understand, because you will not be comfortable. You're if you have a family, your son, your daughter, they will not be comfortable if we keep on this track. I mean, if you don't change, if you don't have this alternative economy, if you don't fight the monopoly on money, which is the worst of all.
Yeah, I agree with you. Passion is something you cannot buy. That's exactly right. And so that's why, that's why Bitcoin Cash has just got BTC absolutely beat by a mile. And people don't, people are slowly starting to understand that. But whenever you see an argument by somebody saying, oh, but the price is higher on Bitcoin, or the even back when the price was declining relatively, when they were saying, well, the price was going up relative to BCH, like that makes me more bullish on BCH, not less, because if
Of
I
course.
see there's more activity going on in that community, because they don't care. They're like, I'm happy to lose, in the short term, this, certain gains that I could have made, because this is where the action is. Like, that's what you really want to see.
Exactly. And many people don't understand that investors do not create value. The investor maybe is seeking value, but the value is created by the entrepreneur and the user. If it's a network, I mean that the product is a network. So this fixation on the price, it's to me it's a sign that these guys don't get it. I mean, you can have for example, you can have a big company, very well capitalized, which is about to fall apart. Like, I don't know, Kodak, or you have many examples. The first
MySpace,
iterations
Nokia,
of social media. Nokia, whatever. So they were not lacking money. Perhaps it was they had more money than they knew what to do with it. So no, market cap is it's okay. I mean, it's nice to have the biggest market cap, but you cannot predict anything with that.
Yeah, exactly. In the long run, it all sort of fades out. Anybody can go look at the CoinMarketCap history. They have the archive posts. Just go back 5 years and compare to now. Bitcoin is in there, Ethereum is in there, but otherwise it's a mess in terms of what has survived to now.
One coin. There was one coin. Could you say that one coin was better than, I don't know, the next one? Yes, if you are only seeing the price, you could say that. But today with BTC, it's exactly that. It's no different than the Madoff pyramid scheme.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. They're gonna struggle, and we've seen a bit of this very interesting this week from Edward Snowden. Who's a very interesting figure as related to the crypto movement. Obviously, a huge supporter, and obviously, a bit of a thought leader in terms of privacy and fighting back against the government and all this sort of stuff. And even though I know he knows about crypto, but I've never thought in the past of him as making a lot of I mean, he's glad to see it going on, but he hasn't really waded in to the debate, as far as I know, to get involved in crypto industry things rather than privacy or anti-government. He's got enough on his plate, right? And so recently he was making these. That's an understatement, probably, but
Yeah,
he's too busy for all of this.
we can forgive him.
Yeah, exactly. And he's made this tweet this week, which has said he did a video which I watched. I recommend to everybody, where he was sort of talking about Bitcoin. And he was talking about problems with the privacy and so on and so forth. So somebody replied to him and said, that's all wrong, blah blah blah. You don't know what you're talking about, basically. And then he said in response, Edward Snowden says, the worst part of cryptocurrency transforming into dragon level wealth is witnessing good people emotionally devolve into dragons themselves, so intellectually paralyzed by the fear that everyone they see threatens their horde that they lose sight of the world beyond their cave. And this is, I think,
Well,
what you were just saying about people, who they got rich or Bitcoin went up for them. And because it went up and it, benefited them in that short term, then they thought it's going up, it must be good, rather than sort of
yeah,
sticking to their principles and changing things, and so yeah, Snowden, he just has some more comments here. People could have a look at
yeah.
the
It's
slide.
interesting. I well, again, I'm not talking about here about Edward Snowden, poor guy, but many people, I'm conflicted about this because I can't believe that you are here for the right reasons, and you you didn't have the time, or you find the time to learn what really happened here in from 2015 to 2018, let's say. Uh, so I think that's a good test. Do you care enough to really dig into this? So I'm not saying that Edward Snowden, as you said, he he has a lot of problems to deal with, but many people seem to be just entertained by this. They are not aligned with the with the principles, uh, and those principles are the principles of civilization. We're not talking about just money. I mean, money is important because it's been uh, monopolized. It's been used to rob us in a way that many people don't understand. So it's difficult because many people were brainwashed into thinking that money just doesn't work if it's not government money. But that's why we have to show them. It's the same with the taxi driver industry before Uber. You could say, look, this is bad. This is a monopoly, and this they charge more than they should, whatever. And people would say, okay, libertarian. They would say, but I don't care. But then when they experiment and they start using it, then they understand, and then perhaps they can see exactly what you meant, and they will not go back to the taxi if they have something like Uber. So I think we need that same spirit. I mean, just go there, show to people, explain it, just to the people that really are interested, the people that are asking questions, but just show them what you can do and why it's useful for them, and they will not go back to fiat money. I mean, I've seen it, and I've done it here.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I mean, I think as much as I'm quite ideologically invested in this whole project and everything with cryptocurrency, but I don't find myself strongly aligned with the sort of libertarian community, such as I've found it kind of online or in different places. I think a lot of that labeling and stuff is not really that helpful, because whenever I look at that, I see a lot of talk and not a lot of action. To me,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
more kind of like,
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. And our enemies are all about action because they know that they know that in debates they are not good at debates. They have uh, to do tricks, let's say, and it's difficult and exhausting. But they are good at action. They know. I mean, look at what they've done in the extreme cases. Let's say communism. They had horrible ideas, but they knew that if they were really committed to these ideas, they could change the world, and they changed it for the worst. And it was it was the worst thing that happened to the world. I don't know, since Genghis Khan, but they did it. So we have something to learn. We yes, even from those guys.
yeah, I agree, and I think that it's just really, layers of an onion, right? It's a microcosm. BTC versus BCH, I think, is increasingly trending in this direction where Bitcoin is about this sort of passive holding it and hoping that the value goes up, or claiming or whatever.
Yeah,
And with BCH, it's
and
like you got to go out there,
yeah,
you got to
yeah,
meet people, you got to talk to them, you got to trade with
yeah,
them, you got to
yeah.
spread adoption or make services, or like all that kind
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
stuff.
And not waiting for someone big to rescue us.
Yeah, yeah, proactivity.
That's the statist mindset.
So yeah, we'll see what Snowden comes up with, basically. But I wonder if he's aware of sort of cash fusion on Bitcoin Cash, or I sort of get the sense that a lot of these figures who are in the scene, but maybe that it's not their bread and butter, looking into all these cryptocurrencies and everything. Whether if Bitcoin Cash really starts to rise up, that it will then create a flood of kind of support. From these sorts of individuals or big holders, or it's all going to snowball on itself, essentially. So yeah, I've got a slide here so we can just talk about, I think, for people who don't know much about Argentina, like I certainly am not an expert. I know there's been problems with devaluing the currency, and you said a little bit at the start, but can you just explain, like, for people who maybe they've never even heard about this, like what it is actually
Well,
like to live in a country where your money is devaluing at how fast does it devalue, and how do people adapt?
yeah, that's I don't know. Really, each of each it has its advantages because people stop depending on government. People know that even this the handouts are also a thing here. It's not just the nanny state in Europe, perhaps, that you're familiar with, but when the states here says, "Yeah, I will help you," people know that they will throw money at you that will be worth nothing in a few months, or at best a year or two. So nobody take them seriously, and this is good. I think that makes Argentina one of the best places on earth for Bitcoin, and that's why I'm so angry with some people that made that process stop. We were on our way to mass adoption, and I think we are again. So how how do people adapt to this? Yeah, and I think that people it's easier here because it's been so long that people are not familiar with other systems. So when you when you say, look, this kind of money, when you are portraying BCH, you can use it. Nobody can take it from you, and it goes up in value in the long term because nobody can. So you explain the basics, really the basics. people love it. So just the idea. I mean, here in Argentina, the government is so big and so ¿cómo se dice?
Involved? I don't know. So much
Yeah, they
entrenched.
want to,
Yeah.
yeah, entrench. And no, and what I mean is they want to intervene in everything. So people are used to evade.
Right.
So no, I see some people in the first world countries. They say, "Oh, but what do you do with this tax or that tax?" People here are used to cash,
Yeah.
and if you say peer-to-peer electronic cash, the click is there. It's really fast because they know the advantages of cash. When you pay in cash, you have a discount because people don't want to use the banks for obvious reasons. And so I think when people start using it, they just can't go back. And you don't know for what they are using it. I mean, people are, I don't know, playing poker. People are
Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
people are making now making these SLP tokens and experimenting, and people are, I don't know, people, and you shouldn't care, because money, a good kind of, if there's a use case that you don't like and you can stop, that's not a good kind of money. I mean, it is sound money. It is good money if anyone can use it for whatever they want, even if you disapprove. So I think this is what we'll see. We will start to see transactions, the number of transactions go up, and we will not know what's the use case that's driving that.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, that will be the point of no return.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, it's just key that in the history of Bitcoin, it was one of the most sort of sacred principles was, that it should be uncensorable, right? Like in the early days with people sending money to WikiLeaks, that was what it was about. And then also with the Silk Road was that this kind of money that you could use to trade with somebody that was not approved by the government or by any other individuals or payment processors or banks or whatever, and so then that's why fees on BTC rising has been a disaster for a lot of reasons, because not only is it just that it's more expensive, everybody can understand at the basic level you don't want to have that. But on the other hand, it also means you can't have enhanced privacy like we have on Bitcoin Cash with
Yeah,
Cash
yeah,
Fusion, because if the fees are too expensive,
yeah,
you can't afford to do it. And then also it's another form of censorship, which is that if you have under a certain amount of money, you can't trade that amount of money because it's just too expensive. And so these things have far
yeah.
reaching effects.
You're pushing people into a custodian. So that's why I think that, yeah, of course, this was the intent, and to reintroduce the middleman, to reintroduce friction, and money with friction. Yeah, in the long term, people will avoid. Money is about from commerce, from exchange. So I don't see it working. They will have try another thing. I don't know exactly what, but this is not working. This will not work.
Yeah, so like just for my own like curiosity then, obviously, so let's say in Argentina the peso is going to devalue at such a fast rate that okay, you earned a certain amount of pesos this month and then by next month it's only worth half as much. So as a result, how do things operate like in a
They
supermarket
well
or
people yeah
how does that even work?
people people their savings are in dollars. Most of people they buy dollars, and then they sell dollars when they need the cash,
Yeah.
and that's how they deal with it. People that can't save are fucked. I
Yeah.
mean, this and poor people are the most the most hard hit by inflation. uh, people use. So if you have people used to the advantages of cash and the advantages of cash in dollars versus cash in pesos, again, they know uh, good money when they see it. They know that you need a good medium of exchange, and also they use dollars, not pesos. So people are not stupid. If they don't use the dollar, it's because they don't have enough pesos to buy the dollars. But they know that it's better to save in dollars than in pesos. Even if it's a shitty fiat currency, it's much better than the peso. So this is the way people deal with this. Just don't use the peso only if absolutely necessary, and then buy whatever in order to store value. That if you think that you will need that money in a couple of months or perhaps 1 year or two, it's okay to have it stored in US dollars.
Yeah. Okay.
This is how people think here.
Yeah, really interesting. Like, I'll have to come check it out and visit. Well, maybe not right now with the pandemic and everything, but yeah,
Oh,
just to see. So then, like, would you say that in the what percentage of sort of daily trade, like, let's say if you were forced to use pesos, I don't know, in like official employment or
oh,
different things, but
here,
between
no,
friends, you just use dollars, right? Or how does that work?
yeah, no, even the business accept dollars. If you ask, they will not have
A
a
sign,
picture
okay.
of the dollar. They will not say I accept. But if you ask, almost everyone accept dollars. So yeah, the dollar is the currency here. It's just the peso. It's just because the government, until this system collapse completely, and it will, and perhaps soon, uh, we will have the peso. Then perhaps we will have just the dollar, or perhaps a new currency that it's called peso or something. It's been like this. It's a cycle, and it's a very frequent cycle. That's why people here are trained. I mean, I think that if what you have here, you have in, I don't know, Germany, people will freak out, and it will be even more disastrous than it is here, because the cycle is longer. But here people are ready for something different and useful, and they get it. I'm telling you, because I this is my thing now. This is what I do every day.
Yeah.
And once, well, you cannot distinguish exactly what is a user, what is an investor, what is a business. I mean, sometimes you have all the three or four in the same person. He's a user, he's an investor, he's a business owner, whatever. So but what I see is that when someone, and yes, you are right, sometimes the price going up, it calls the attention of people, and they start asking questions, and it's 5 minutes, and the next question is, okay, where can I buy it?
That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
They get it. There's people that still struggle to understand the difference between having an account, and having your own wallet. But I think that's our job, to help people understand that difference.
Yeah, exactly. Education is absolutely key, and to me as well, it's just a reason that cryptocurrency is just so unstoppable, because I see people comment, especially online, and they have a lot of worries about, okay, well, what about the government regulation, and what about this and that, the average person doesn't need it and everything, and you can read those comments, and it's just so obvious that is from somebody who either hasn't traveled much, or they're not thinking in that global mindset, and maybe where they are, like perhaps in America or in, some, I don't know, Sweden or something. They're living somewhere where the currency is fine, everybody's got a bank account, the financial system works, maybe their local group of friends, they don't know anybody who's sort of at the fringes of the society or who struggles in that respect. And so to them, it's just like, it does, the overriding factors are, what does the government think, and yada yada. But it's like the world is a bigger
and also
place,
the government is somewhat efficient.
Yeah.
The government. I mean, so here, the government will threat you like every government, but people know. I mean, you have it's. I mean, it's almost it's a joke. If you try to survive here, complying with every regulation, every law, which is almost every day changing, it's not possible. I mean, everyone would be dead. It's like in the Soviet Union, you needed people to avoid the law. Because otherwise, if you have all good Bolsheviks, they would be all dead. It's impossible to navigate. It's impossible to survive this kind of system. So that's a good thing if you think like an accelerationist, because it can be much worse because the government has no power. The government has no respect from people. So I think this is the place where Bitcoin, in the form of Bitcoin Cash, will explode, because when the government says, look, this is no good, people look at it and they say, oh, sorry, this must be good. And this is, I'm not exaggerating. This is how people think here.
No, I think it's just amazing, really. Like, anyway, I just find it fascinating because when if you've traveled around the world, or you have met a lot of different people, or whatever, this is not a surprise, like, to anybody. But to some people who are not in that, they don't have that perspective. They sort of think, they can't see it applying in their situation, and they can't understand how it would actually apply in another situation. And then that creates a snowball where then there's more people to trade with, so it's more useful. So eventually it will apply in their situation, even if it's when the rest of the world is using it. But it's just one domino pushes off kind of another one, right? So I thought today as well, I really wanted to go through a bit of a history of cryptocurrency, sort of in the sort of eras as I see them, and maybe give people some context as to how I've done episodes before about the fork and everything like that, but just in the broad picture for people coming into this, so that they can follow exactly how it all went down. And I believe you told me you adopted Bitcoin in 2010, right? So that was very, very early.
The first blog post.
Yeah.
The first blog post I read about Bitcoin was in April or May 2010. Yes, it was a blog, one of those blogs where many people write, and the title was it was like, "Is this the end of the biggest swindle in history?" That was the title.
Great title.
And I was describing Bitcoin, and then back then I was very, very busy. I was working a lot, and then I took a look at it again in December, and then with my wife we went on vacation, and that vacation was just we were in the home learning about Bitcoin and reading everything and watching, and listening to the podcast and listening to Gavin Andres and listening to Amir Taaki. And we decided that we would be we wanted to be part of it. Yes, and it was difficult here, but in some ways it was difficult because we had restrictions. capital restrictions, capital controls. It was impossible to send money from this country to another, and there were no people mining back then here. But we had subsidies, electricity subsidies. So electricity was extremely cheap here. When people started learning about Bitcoin, many people started mining Bitcoin, and it was profitable. But most of these guys were gamers.
Yeah.
They just used their computer.
graphic cards, yeah.
When I started, you could mine with CPU, and so the GPU era was just starting, and I think most people in those first years got their bitcoins from GPU mining, but they sold they tended to sell again the short-sightedness. They didn't understand the value. They tended to they usually so they were very surprised that people were keen on buying this whatever. They didn't know exactly what it was, and I remember many interactions with these guys that were just amazed at people buying these coins or whatever because they just stopped playing their games for a while, and then they had I don't know $10, and they were happy to sell their bitcoins
Buy a beer.
for cents.
Yeah, exactly. They're just like, well, we'll just get rid of it, and that was free money, right? That just came out of their computer, so they could just be handing it off like wherever.
Yeah, that's what I told you. That's what I said. Why I said is Bitcoin tends to punish short-sightedness. This is just one example.
Yeah. So okay, so let's wind it back a little bit before then. So obviously, I'll probably end up doing another episode as well where I talk about the entire history of money. There was a lot of lead up to all of this, but for the sake of time, we've got to sort of start the story here somewhere. So to me, when I think about cryptocurrency, this is where I sort of see the story kind of beginning in one sense. So in 1983, there's a guy called David Chaum, and he made this idea called eCash, which was essentially like the early precursor to Bitcoin, and it had mostly the same ideas of using mathematics and cryptography in order to create a certain currency that you could trade, and that could be sort of anonymous or have protections over people's identity and all of those kind of things. And that was in the 80s, and then that idea was sort of flowing around in this kind of cypherpunk mailing list in the 80s and the 90s. And while that was going on, as people were sort of looking for technological solutions where they hadn't quite got it nailed, but the idea was kind of rolling along, at the same time as that, you had companies that were interested in launching kind of gold-backed currencies, right? Because the US government went off the gold standard in 1971. And so there was, at that time, more public consciousness, I guess, of people who had been around for that, and they sort of understood, well, people still want to have a gold-backed currency, and they still want to be able to, trade something that is not just printed out by the government endlessly and all that sort of stuff. So you had these two currencies called e-gold and then Liberty Reserve. So that was from 96 to 2009 for e-gold, and then Liberty Reserve was 2006 to 2013. And both of them were essentially a bank sort of thing, but where they had a gold reserve that they showed to all the users this is how much it was, and you could transfer among people in that system and know that there was kind of gold reserves that you could then withdraw later. And what both of them sort of struggled with was that, of course, once the US government figured out that this is what was going on, and then people were, starting their own, I think both were very, very popular because obviously people liked the idea of that sort of sound money, people flooding into it. And so then it got big enough that the government is what is going on, came along and sort of shut them down in both cases because there was just a company and they could find that company and who was involved in that and stop it there. And so you had these kind of parallel tracks leading up to the invention of Bitcoin, of the cryptographic technology based approach, and then also sort of the alternative currency approach running along at each time. I don't know if you were involved in any of this,
Yeah.
or you know were following this scene at the time. Like,
Look, I remember this poor guy from eGold when he made a video when they were starting to pursue this shutdown, and then he went to jail. It was very very sad. Yes, I think this is what once something that clicked with me was I looked up. Okay, when they shut down eGold, how big was eGold? How big was it? And it was nothing compared to Bitcoin, even in the first years. So, sorry, that was the first time I realized that was one of the one of the pistas, the maybe you speak Spanish, maybe
yeah,
you can help me. One of the clues
yeah,
that this was different. They can't do to Bitcoin what they did to eGold, obviously. So, but then I think the problem with some of these guys is that they were good developers, and many of these guys I've talked with many coders. They usually say Satoshi was not a good coder, or perhaps that was we have to thank God for that, because Satoshi didn't have a lot of time perhaps to learn how to code beautifully, but he obviously had a lot of time to study other fields, and that's why it was possible for him to build this system of incentives. Many of the coders don't understand this, and so they think that they can tweak this and they can just put out this piece. And no. If you don't have the whole system of incentives in place, it doesn't work. So this is typical coder kind of thinking. I'm not saying that everyone, but this is something I usually see. And people that are more into economics, perhaps that's why so many of the early adopters are more, into economics, and so many coders missed the train, or thought they missed the train, because they couldn't get the important stuff. Just the code is the way to implement a system. It's not the system.
yeah. I think this is a super super important point because to me, for my background is right. I'm a professional programmer now, but I wasn't at the time when I found cryptocurrency. But I was I was certainly technically minded. But I think on both sides of the spectrum, we've seen the finance industry, the tech industry has been faster than the finance industry, but neither of them have done a spectacular job of getting onto it, because you do need to think about it at a very conceptual level like that, where it is more than there's so much of it's economics, I guess technically, but it's economics in the sense of like sociology, anthropology,
Of course.
psychology. You need to know history, like we're talking about here with the history of money and all those things, and you need to understand those dynamics. And so with coders, or engineers in general of any kind, their solution to things is going to be an engineering based solution. So when they see
Yep.
a problem or whatever, they tend to think, what can we tweak in the engineering? But they will not necessarily understand the ramifications that are outside of the code. And that's why any company will tell you this, because that's why you have a product team basically, or a marketing
Yeah.
team, or
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
sales team, because they all need to coordinate around the engineers and give them the right information and get the right software out, but it sort of can't really be left up to the engineers to
If,
drive the whole project.
if you have them, them at the top, you have social engineering. This is what we're seeing with Blockstream and Bitcoin BTC.
Yeah, and everything being a sort of a code problem or something that can
and this worship of these guys that they don't know what they are doing, or they know very well, but anyway they can. It's very easy for them to speak in a way that people don't get, and people tend to think, okay, I will never understand this. No, yes, you can understand it.
I
mean, we need coders, of course. We need engineers, but we need engineers in the service of a system, not at the top. I mean, like planning the system in the same way that a government can plan an economy. You can't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even for people who say like Satoshi was not a very good coder, I haven't done a lot of myself reviewing of Satoshi's code, but I think a lot of people really, really undersell Satoshi, who are either in the cryptocurrency community or if they're outside of it, right? Like, obviously, a lot of people who didn't understand Bitcoin, they want to criticize every single thing. We shouldn't have 21 million coins. That's the wrong amount. Or you shouldn't have a cap. Or it can't work because they had all these things. And Satoshi thought of all of them, basically. Every thing was just very nicely set up in terms of the emission schedule that it would halve at certain times, and so many things. And I've read an article which was about security analysis of the early Bitcoin code, where people were looking at it and they thought, okay, look, we're going to find a fault in this. So maybe Satoshi's code wasn't beautiful at a conceptual level, but it was very practical. And every time they were trying to we'll attack it this way, it was already like
Dan Kaminsky.
Yeah, exactly.
He died a couple of days ago.
Yeah, R.I.P. But yeah, that's right. People looking at these things, they it's very hard for me to accept that anybody who other than Satoshi is in a great position to be tweaking around with it too much.
Yeah. Satoshi was not right about everything, of course, nobody is, but he was right about the important stuff. I think that at this point you cannot discuss that. And if you're discussing that, it's because you have an agenda. I mean, for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it will be
suit your interest.
Yeah, we'll see actually as time goes forward with the altcoin market, other cryptos, developing and so on and so forth. Like, you have a lot of things that people are doing, but it's going to be so hard for anybody to be the next Satoshi. Like, people are trying to
exactly.
Yeah,
it's fine to experiment, but you will not have a breakthrough like Satoshi's once a week.
Yeah,
it's just it doesn't happen. Never. I mean, I'm not saying this is it, but people are always searching the new shiny thing, and again, short-sightedness. If you don't understand why Satoshi made the decisions he made, you will not be able to understand where's the flaw in this new shiny thing.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. For instance, Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, I definitely think he's the closest by far. And one key aspect of the fact, the way that he is sort of involved in Ethereum relative to founders of other cryptocurrencies, I think, is that he understands, he did Ethereum, but he didn't say Satoshi did this wrong. It was more like, okay, it wasn't the right thing for my use case, but he very clearly understands at a very profound level, all of how it was set up initially.
But I see in him, of course, he's a genius, but I see in him one of these flaws typical of the developer. And when they started Ethereum, they said, we're not competing with Bitcoin. And I think that was not very honest, because if you will build a smart contract, system, it doesn't matter how complex is this smart contract. What the contract is doing at the end of the day is just deciding where the money will go.
Yeah.
No, at what point or in time or according to what conditions, whatever. But it's money. I mean, if you don't have this first layer, let's say, if you didn't solve the money problem, the smart contract will be useless. So I think that's something that many people don't stop and think about. No, what are we doing? And if you don't have sound money, what's the purpose of everything else that you're trying to build on? Like perhaps not as good kind of money, or money that can be eventually intervened in some way, or it will stop working as money. If it will stop working as good money, as sound money, it will just stop working. Everything. The system is useless.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because people, I think in some respects where we are right now in the cryptocurrency space, people have gone a long way from, it's called cryptocurrency, right? People forget that the currency, that's it. That's literally half of it. It's cryptography and currency. That's the combination. And so because of there's been so much speculation and so much, smart contracts and all these other tech and everything that everybody wants to do, it's not that those are bad or anything, but it's all got to be built on the premise that it's got to be something people want to and can trade,
And that was the spirit. That was the spirit. They said in the first years, okay, let them experiment. Let the altcoins experiment. It's like a big lab, And then when we see that something works, we can try to port it into Bitcoin. That was the original idea. So I think that today, perhaps Smart BCH is one of these examples. Okay, this works. This might be interesting. Let's make it even more useful. This kind of money that we have here, that is 100 and 1,000 times better than fiat money. Okay, what else we can do to make it even more useful? It's not, okay, this works, let's make a new network, because that defeats the purpose of money, which is, money without network effect, again, it's not useful. We don't have the luxury that gold bugs have. Even if nobody used gold for as money, it will have uses, industrial uses and other stuff. So we don't have that. If Bitcoin is not used as money, it's useless. So we have to start from the basis.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, so let's take a look. So my timeline was that they had those early days of money where people were probably thinking about a lot of these ideas in some sort of corner of society, right? It was not very like mainstream or anything like that. And then in 2008, Satoshi publishes the white paper, and then I don't know, this is, again, I wasn't there at the time, so you can comment on whether this is accurate, but I sort of see this early first, year and a half, maybe 2009, 2010, as being because there was no market price for Bitcoin, that it was very conceptual. Like it is only the most hardcore, ideologically interested and or technically capable to understand all these different concepts, and that kind of crystallized after maybe more than a year and a half of the network running and everything happening, with the purchase of the 2 pizzas that Laszlo did online for the pizza, and that was the critical moment that moved it into the next kind of era, right? Is that then, because as soon as you trade it for anything, well, then you just do some maths, and now you know how much 1 Bitcoin is worth, right? So, like, for you, like, do you think that's an accurate explanation of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because now the BTC boys are saying that Bitcoin is not, you cannot buy or you shouldn't buy a pizza or frankly anything
Yeah.
with Bitcoin. And this was the big breakthrough. And they still they think or they repeat, I don't know, that you shouldn't do with Bitcoin what Bitcoin was created to do.
Mm.
So it's it's something that I mean, those first years people were debating all day. What will the government will do with this? They will not just let it grow. They will do something. But I think they took the time when they. I remember when Gavin Andresen uh, was called by the CIA.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
Yeah, in
are
2011.
familiar with
Yeah.
this episode. Well, the first altcoin, many people don't know, the first altcoin was born as a result of that. It
Mm.
was called Solid Coin
Solid coin.
because this, yeah, this guy uh, said, okay, Gavin Andresen is compromised, which is bullshit, but some people believe him, and he made a different and a new kind of Bitcoin, which was solid coin. And for I don't know a couple of months, there were people that it was there was a place for them in the forums, and they were convinced that solid coin was the future because Bitcoin was compromised. Well, so, but I think that Gavin was. Gavin went there and talked with these guys. And then when he left, they sat down and started thinking, okay, what can we do about that? Because this is a different kind of beast.
Mm.
And this was in early 2011.
2011,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I think in 2013, 14, we started to see the results of this plan. This is no conspiracy theory. I mean, you have a lot of material, and it's all public. It's very easy to see through this, but it's easy if you want,
Mm.
if you really want to know what happened. Uh, anyway, this is this is I think it's sad, but as we said at the beginning, this was going to happen. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
So if it's difficult, in a way, it's better because now we are trained. Now we know how they think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think so. I've got this early sort of era here, and probably yeah, maybe about I've put at the time when this pizza was bought. I guess that sort of gets into the next era, which I have here is 2011 to 2013. I didn't mention um, the the CIA sort of getting involved, but to me, so I would say this is at the end of this, close to the end of this period, is when I first got involved, right in late 2013, and that was this sort of entrepreneurial phase because it had created a market price, and obviously it had, even as horribly volatile and everything as it was right then, people were able to recognize some utility to it and were trading it. And so you have all of the sort of who I think, you know, the earliest entrepreneurs. So Charlie Shrem, who started a company called BitInstant, Roger Ver with Bitcoin.com, blockchain.info, Coinbase, Brian Armstrong and other people, Fred Osam, whatever, Satoshi guys, the Eric Voorhees, and of course, most tragically, Ross Ulbricht with
Well,
the Silk Road, creating a market where people could trade drugs online, because with Bitcoin you could do that. I didn't put on this slide either the sort of WikiLeaks incident and people sending donations to WikiLeaks, but that is sort of entrepreneurial after a sense. And so I sort of feel
of
like
course.
in those years, the key story was that it had moved from this kind of experiment, perhaps. Well, it's always going to be an experiment in some ways, but the experiment of 2009, 2010 to 2011, 2013, the forming of a new economy, basically. And yeah, like for me, I became involved sort of close to the end when Bitcoin was about $300, and it had it was just before the China, Mount Gox blew up, and there was Chinese money flowing into it, and miners and all this kind of stuff going on. It was absolute chaos at the time,
Yeah,
but
yeah. People think that today we have chaos. They don't know
yeah,
what chaos is.
exactly. Like, I'm sure that will be lost, to the annals of time to some extent. But yeah, like,
Yeah, because MTGOX was like no, it was not the only one, but it had I think like 90% of the volume was done in GOX, so it was huge, and people lost. And it's incredible that you have people behaving the same way in each cycle. This you have people losing everything in people shouting, no, don't put your money in an exchange, and people still put their money in an exchange. And you have people saying, watch out, this is como se dice?
this is a scam.
This is a scam.
Yeah.
This is a scam. Whatever. This new project. This is a scam. And people go, and I don't know if you remember the pirate at 40.
No, I don't remember that.
Pyramid scheme. This was the first big one. It was so big that he could move the market, and at some point he disappeared, and then he was sent to jail. But but it's almost the same every time. So that's why I think it's important to focus in the people that can see through all this bullshit. People like Roger Ver, for example. That's I mean, many of these guys were very como se dice, were visionary guys in a way, but I think Roger had and it's funny, it's mind blowing that people today, people that are victim of propaganda, think that Roger Ver is some kind of bad guy. Without Roger Ver, we wouldn't have many of the companies, and we wouldn't have seen this this very fast development, because he was throwing money at everything that he thought it could work. So I lost my train of thought, but
no, I mean, I think it's incredible. Like, people, yeah, it's unbelievable. He's had this huge, propaganda attack against him, basically. But I mean, he has already been rewarded, in some sense for his vision, and it's entirely possible, in my mind, that he's going to be the richest person on planet Earth.
He will be the first trillionaire, perhaps.
Yeah, it's definitely, if the premise of this podcast is correct, and that Bitcoin Cash becomes the global reserve currency, he will be probably the richest person in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe Elon can catch him, but only if Elon starts buying BCH now. If he waits another 10x, it's too late. So
yeah, right. So, but can you imagine? I mean, today Roger Ver is even if he let's suppose he is a trillionaire. The only thing that he will be interested and invested in is in changing the world for the better. So, because his life, anyone, a middle class guy, can have more or less the same kind of life that Roger Ver has today. So it's not about the luxuries. It's about the important stuff. I mean, people don't see how fortunate we are that we are alive today, because we have the possibility. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but previous generations, they were hopeless, and I could understand. If the only thing that you have is just gold or silver, yeah, it already failed. So it's depressing. But now, I mean, wake up. If you think yourself, you think you are a libertarian, what are you doing? I mean, this is what you should be doing. You should be out there educating, explaining, using, showing people. So this is something that I was surprised about. I mean, so many people uh, talking about freedom, and the moment they have the opportunity to live uh, and to liberate many other people to live by their words, they just they disappear.
Yeah, it's you got to walk the walk. You know, you can't just talk the talk. You know, and I think that is something that we're going to see as well, or that we have seen in the history of cryptocurrency, is that people can have the idea, or you know, they can say, "Look, give me this money. I'm going to do this startup or whatever," but those things kind of fade away. So people who put money into them, just be aware. Like now you can even see it with flip starters in Bitcoin Cash, where I think it's great. We have that people can crowdfund something, and some people are able to get one round of crowdfunding, and then, you know, whether they do or they don't deliver that certain amount. But you can't get a second round of crowdfunding unless that first round, unless you know, you got the whole project there, because uh, you know, that's how it should be, right? Is that people are free to invest their money. They can, you know, if they believe a certain person is going to deliver a certain thing and they want to risk their own money, that's fine. And if it all gets lost, well, they learn the lesson that, okay, maybe I should have vetted them better, or maybe I should have only given them a certain amount of money that I didn't mind if it was lost, or whatever it is, right? And those that cycle, which is very easy from the outside to criticize, and especially in this early days, 2011, 2013, the media is, you know, relentless. Oh, Mount Gox has failed, the libertarian dream, it's all dead,
Oh
it's
yeah,
all over. You know, libertarians getting scammed by each other, what a surprise, haha, we all knew it, and stuff like that. And it was very painful at the time for undoubtedly a lot of people, but that it was a necessary process where everybody learned and
yeah.
adapted, and it has provided new solutions, you know.
And it was the biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
Thanks to that shitstorm, you had the biggest opportunity to buy cheap coins.
Yeah, and some people
And
did.
this today it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same with VCA.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. You get a free reset, and maybe we'll just see this cycle over and over again. You know, as each maybe Bitcoin Cash will split into two coins in the future or something, and there will be once again, you know, people picking sides
Yeah, I
and whatever.
yeah. I hope not, because again, because network effect is so important when we're talking about money, and at some point, I think there will be one dominant coin. I don't think it's possible. I mean, you can have many coins, but the the normal thing without state intervention, I think, will be one big coin. This is what people will tend to adopt in the long run. And let's not forget that most, I don't know, 99 point whatever people in the planet don't have
Crypto, yeah.
coins. That's what these BTC people don't get. That this is a process, and this is a long shot also.
Exactly, and they think, well, it's just as much the same as the problems with, oh, the government's going to regulate it and then nobody's going to want it. It's like you got to have some vision of the whole world. You got to understand. Nobody can really understand. You know, it's one of my life theories that nobody truly understands how many people there are on the planet. Like, you can know, okay, there's 7 billion or 8 billion or whatever, but it's impossible to understand 8 billion people wake up every day and, you know, crack on with whatever they're doing in their life, right? Nobody understands exactly how much movement and opinions and ideas and everything is just being churned out of this machine.
I see these guys like those people that say the science is settled. No, it's not settled. I mean, but I like a concept. I think it's from Hayek. He says that money is not a noun; It's an adjective.
Yeah.
No, so he speaks of like moneyness. It's not you don't have just money like this. This is fiat money. You can have fiat money, and that's why it's so bad. But the sound money, it's something that people discover. It's a process. So uh, when you say no, this is it. We decided that Bitcoin BTC will be the base layer for whatever, and then you can do whatever you want up there. Uh, the second layer, which will be divorced from the first layer. This is a model, this completely stupid model that they imagine, and they think that they can impose, like because they have all these resources, perhaps I don't know, government funded or bank funded. I don't know, but it's not how it works. And if you have people, if you don't have these barriers to entry, uh, people will find the alternative, which is which coin is more useful. They will care. Of course, they will care. So with time, people will tend to adopt the currency that other people are adopting.
Exactly.
That's why it's so important to try to, if it's possible, avoid forks. I think this is one of the few things that gold or precious metals have in favor when you compare with cryptocurrencies, because you cannot fork
Gold.
gold.
Yeah.
It's bad because you have a lot of friction when you want to use it, and well, we know the gold is not perfect money, but you cannot change it. It's just as it is. It doesn't depend on people deciding. They can decide if they adopt it, but they cannot change its nature. So this is and so we have to resemble gold in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm in two minds about that. I appreciate what you're saying. You want to have a strong thing that
No,
you can't
I'm not
change.
saying that we have to impose. I'm saying that this is better. I mean, if we get to that point, it will be almost impossible to change the basics.
Yeah,
The,
yeah, I agree with you. Well, because as crypto gets more adopted and more people get involved and more development teams, like, I mean, we're still at the sort of early days in terms of BTC only has one dev team and they've already, wrecked because of that. And BCH has like 5 or 6 that are actually active and have made node implementations. But if we get to be the global reserve currency, it would probably be, I'm guessing we're going to have at least 10, right? There's going to be like Google is probably going to, code their own one, Facebook, Amazon, like surely Tesla, like if you were one of those companies and, you were serious that this was going to take over the world, you would want to have your engineers in those dev discussions. What are we doing? What's getting involved in that way. And so I think the protocol development speed will slow down over
yeah,
time just because the resilience of the currency increases as more people are involved, because the more you want to tweak one thing, the more you're going to piss off different groups, right? So I think that's also why it's quite important to spread adoption and get more people bought in, because the one thing everyone has in common is they want it to work, and they want it to be
yeah,
cheap, because if those things stop, they'll find
exactly,
something else.
exactly.
Yeah, okay. So let's say, I've got this second era here, 2011 to 2013, and then let's say, okay, Mt. Gox blows up at the end of 2013, start of 2014, and to me that created the next era of cryptocurrency, which is 2014 to 2016. And to me, the characteristics of this era, this is also where Ethereum was founded shortly before this and sort of came onto the scene. A lot of other coins spread out. There was proof of stake was sort of coming up and being invented. And the Andreas Antonopoulos, he was just huge at the time because like Roger Ver had done in the earlier stage. At a certain point, you know, Roger sort of he was still obviously out there every single day spreading Bitcoin, but I think, you
Yeah.
know, he decided, look, let me just ease up on this a little bit. And Andreas kind of took up the baton there in explaining it and having the vision for the future and sort of rallying the community, giving a lot of talks all around the world. Uh, and I think the big characteristic topics were sort of the regulation and government interference. It was getting to the point where it was big enough that the community generally was, you know, what about taxes, and what about, you know, when the government, what if they want to shut it down? What about if, you know, all these different things were coming into play, and also the block size limit sort of was coming up, because even though it only became a problem potentially in 2017, or even in theory now, like 2021, this is sort of a testament really to how forward thinking the community was at that time. Like, if you were trying to debate with people now about, you know, in 2030, like, we're going to have these problems, right? You know, but at the time, everybody was thinking, yeah, but when we have the adoption, you know, of all these people, and the blocks are full all the time and everything, you know, that's why it was under debate at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think one of the first guys to say to Satoshi that that was not a very good idea to put a hard limit.
Mm.
Uh, was one of the first guys that responded to this idea.
Mm.
Said, "I don't think this is a good idea." I I don't know if he envisioned what was going to happen many years later, but Satoshi dismissed him because he said, "No, it's just we
We
can do
can
it
just do
this
it. Yeah,
way."
very easy. Max block
He made
size limit. Yeah.
yeah, the instructions. So he was so wrong about that. Speaking about being right, but yeah, um, I think that the owners of the money monopoly, they decided at some point that there was no point in trying to fight it like
Head
with
on. Yeah.
violence, direct violence. So they thought, let's push people into these bank type platforms. Let's do it difficult. Let's make people cry until they decide, okay, this is my only option. So I don't think they could have foreseen the, the forks and the big the altcoins and all the alternatives, but this will be an ongoing struggle. This will not just end. It will end when they decide to adopt the, let's say, BCH, because at that point they will be fighting for BCH, and at that point they will be fighting to end, without knowing perhaps, to end the system that they control, because they are not interested in money. They are interested in your money.
Mm.
They are interested in the value that you add to the economy. And this is just the best way, the easiest way, the way, the most efficient, in the sense that they don't have to face the consequences of robbing you. So once they adopt the new system, they are done forever. This is what I think, and this is why I'm so passionate, and this is why perhaps Antonopoulos was passionate until I don't know what happened to him. If he had a I don't know, and I don't want to know, because it must be very bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in this sort of era of cryptocurrency, like you were saying before, and I think it's hard for people to understand, you know, in hindsight, who weren't there at the time, about how united the community was up until that point. That despite being so small, Bitcoin was just killing it because everybody was on the same page. Yeah, we had Ethereum, we had Litecoin, different coins were going on. But like you said, it was just a sort of a little sideshow project. All the people involved in those coins were also involved in Bitcoin and were, powering it forward. And that it only sort of like, I think of it as like it shattered. It kind of, the market split out into all these
Yeah.
different things as a result of the failings of Bitcoin, which started here, which was that the community got on, started infighting, and they got off this same page, and whatever, influence or whatever discussion was going on that people knew about or didn't know about, that was where the problems kind of kicked in. That it was started with this technological problem of raising the limit, but really it was a social problem and a communication problem of everybody getting on the same page. And so as a result, again, I think in the long run it was beneficial. And one of the reasons that I was interested in Bitcoin in the earlier phase was because I knew that, okay, even if there was a problem with Bitcoin, because it's all open source, anybody could just create a fork or an alternative coin, either have slightly different pros and cons to get it past whatever block it had encountered. And I didn't think that it would go down the way it did, but that's just what ended up happening, right?
Yeah.
So I think then, so to me, that sort of is their whole. That was a very well, every one of these periods has a slightly different like flavor to it in cryptocurrency history, but that was certainly the most turbulent internally in
Oh
the
yeah. Oh
community
yeah.
by far.
Oh, yeah. And people don't know. People that uh, I think I mean, after all this, are uh, like a kid
Mm,
that was born in North Korea.
yeah.
I mean, they have if they search and they don't care enough, they have this new speak and uh, new of the, let's say, official narrative,
Mm,
and they go along with it. They don't know that 99% of people were on the same page with Satoshi
mm,
on the scaling debate. There was no debate.
mm,
Almost anyone at that point thought that Bitcoin couldn't scale. It was weird for the first time hearing some people in 2013, I think, Bitcoin doesn't scale, like Peter Todd said. And then he said he was contacted by a CIA person to
mm,
make this, the CIA agent to make this video explaining how Bitcoin just don't scale and how important it is to keep the limit at 1 megabyte, 1 megabyte forever.
mm,
So it's it's something that nobody took seriously even then. So they couldn't convince people, and that's why they went full force with censorship and buying everything, buying the media, buying the forums, buying the people that they were able to buy. But at the beginning, as you said, it was. I mean, the Roger Ver mindset was the norm.
mm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it really, well, yeah, it really just changed. Like, that's interesting that you put it that way in terms of the, like being born into a system. People are born into a system like in the fiat currency. I know a lot of people that they say, oh, Bitcoin's never going to work or something, and it's like they think that because they've never known any different, right? They wouldn't have necessarily come up with their system that they're in, but they're used to it their whole life, so they don't see any alternative. And then maybe it is the same, definitely with people who came into
Of course,
Bitcoin.
and and let's not forget that governments are used to manipulating people. I mean, they are experts in that,
Mm,
and they have thousands. They've been doing this for thousands of years, so that's why we shouldn't be surprised,
mm,
and we shouldn't expect people to understand all this and be focused and in these things. People will understand when Most people will understand when they see it,
mm,
when they can compare it and they can experiment that. uh, and and that's the point of no return, no debate.
Yeah.
Debate is fine, but we will not win by debating.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess that sort of comes to this next slide. Is I didn't really put on the slides, but essentially there was the Hong Kong agreement and there was the New York agreement, and there was, I mean, I don't even remember all the exact what went on, but basically the summary was that various people in the industry in different capacities, developers and businesses and Andreas Antonopoulos, people who were involved, who were big in the discussion, they were having global meetups, which was very hard to do, and you probably couldn't even do it now because it's just too spread out. But at the time, there was still small enough that you could get sort of a core, a central amount of people that probably had enough influence to spread around their ideas and say, look, okay, how are we going to resolve this? Everybody's infighting, whatever. And there was, agreements made at those ones about, okay, we're going to raise the block size limit here, or we're going to put in SegWit, which was what, the BTC, what became the BTC side sort of wanted to do. And all of this stuff was kind of going on. But basically, it all ended up in disaster with various machinations in one way or another, such that Mori.
Yeah, but most people don't know that most people were silent.
Mm,
I mean, this conference we were not allowed to give our opinion.
mm,
We were not allowed to talk. When I say we, I mean back then was the Bitcoin Unlimited guys.
mm.
They tried everything. It was obvious that it was the idea was, let's eject these guys from the ecosystem. So they became the de facto government
Controllers of it, yeah.
of of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, for me, yeah, it was sort of the same in that at the time, I had been posting on Reddit /r/Bitcoin where there was a lot of the discussion and all that, and they started with there was censorship and there was people getting banned, and I had a lot of posts that were very highly upvoted. I know people were loving it. I know what you're saying. Everybody was on the same page, but then people were getting banned. And all,
Yeah,
all this sort of
and
stuff.
this
Yeah,
guy, the guy that was responsible, he said, if I have to
kick out.
push out, kick out like 99%, I will do it.
That's right.
And this was a big surprise because I was one of the founders of the Spanish version or Spanish section in the Bitcoin Talk forums.
Hmm.
Back then, it was not called Bitcoin Talk, but whatever. So this guy, Tamos, was very nice guy. I remember asking him if we can we have this Spanish section. He said yes, okay, no problem. And he was very nice, and he responded quickly, and he he changed in a way, not because of niceness, because of the core ideas. He changed like 180. Is that what
Yeah,
the way
180
to say?
degree. Yeah,
Like it was 180-degree. Uh, so that was very surprising to me because I thought, okay, this guy is into the right principles. He at least will allow some debate. This is a way we progress. Exchanging ideas. Let's see which one is the best. And the way he behaved, it really made me think that he was not the same person. I mean, I perhaps, but it was. I mean, it was fascinating to see how this worked in many people because I didn't know really. I didn't know that it was that easy. But now I understand. I think living through all this, I understand how they do it. I mean, it was an amazing experience, to learning experience,
yeah,
and I think for many people that was the case. So now we are, let's say, uh, immunized to some extent to this same kind of attacks.
yeah. That's right. So BTC, Bitcoin is going along. It splits into BTC and BCH. I'm trying to explain every step of it. For people, this might be their first ever episode of the podcast, right? So it splits into these two in the 1st of August 2017, and the from that point, Bitcoin ended up at the time. What was the real Bitcoin was very up for debate, like in the sense that if you were an exchange, perhaps like both of them could say we're Bitcoin and you're not, basically, and for different reasons. And as it went, Bitcoin Cash, what we now call Bitcoin Cash, which at the time was called Bitcoin ABC, ended up having to sort of shift off the brand. It ended up kind of being in the minority for a whole lot of reasons that to do with the hash rate and to do with the different exchanges and who
Yeah, but
listed it under what.
let's not forget that the hash rate was pointing at at a particular point in time. Was pointing at Bitcoin Unlimited. It has the most amount of hash power.
Yeah.
And then because this is not just there were many angles, not only social attacks, were also like, how do you say, computational attacks, or
technological type of
of the network. So they that way they could make these guys look bad, and that was it. This is the turning point, I think.
So now that after they had split off, obviously, Bitcoin Cash was in a crisis, right? Because it had been it was under attack, in terms of the community discussion. It was under attack in terms of this had never happened before. There'd always just been one Bitcoin, and then at least the side that became BTC, they sort of had the advantage of they sort of were able to carry the momentum and just say everybody who doesn't want it, just leave, right? But when you do like, it's a game theory thing, if you split a group into one group of people and the rest, well, the rest are obviously, they might have a different reasons that they disagree with the main road why they left. And so then they have to reform and decide, okay, we all agree not this, but then what do we all support, as one instead?
Yeah.
And so because of this, Bitcoin Cash was just in this huge like conflagration of crisis, really, because this had never happened before. So now if a Bitcoin forked or the Bitcoin Cash forked, exchanges, they know, okay, maybe we can wait a week and then list it, or maybe they have their methods for how do we determine that, or what are the miners likely to do in a situation with multiple coins, or all of these things were completely unknown at the time. And so for the Bitcoin Cash side, which was in the minority of the fork as it kind of went down in the end, I agree with you that up to that point, it probably had the majority hash rate at times. It definitely had the majority of the community, probably even had the economic majority, would have voted for it if people could vote, with their dollars. But then when it came down to the split, because of all these different agreements and how much chaos and confusion had been created by that time, it was not necessarily clear, as to what the outcome would be. So people are trying to like sort of bet with loads of money on the line as to which one they sell and which one they buy, and how controversial it was. So at that time, I sold all my Bitcoin and I just bought all Bitcoin Cash. Like that, I was just like, this is obviously Bitcoin Cash is the way to go. And I mean, historically, that was a terrible decision.
No, but
you
were right.
Yeah.
But I don't think it matters that much. For the same reasons that the guy that bought at 32 was considered, the bad timing, and then it resulted that he was a very clever early adopter of I mean, if he did it for the right reasons, because if not, he would have sold immediately, or just when he freaked out. So I think this is the same. This is story repeating itself. I was about to say something. I don't know. Just Go on.
Yeah. So because of this, and
Sorry,
yeah,
sorry. This is
okay.
this that we didn't know exactly how it would evolve,
Yeah.
but we did know something very important, that the economic model of Bitcoin BTC was unsustainable.
Yeah.
So this was, you said, this game theory thing. Yeah, you are right. But in the long run, uh, that which cannot continue will not continue.
Yeah.
So this, you were right in the way that it's important to be right,
Mm.
not in the short time uh, price or short time horizon. Price moves.
Mm.
This is not what makes the Satoshi's dream come true.
Yeah, exactly. And for people to think about one of the reasons that I did that, and I think that a lot of the community were thinking that way, was because it was about that long term vision. And so, even though the split was over the 1 megabyte limit, and the idea that one day fees would become too high, uh, actually, how it worked out was that people were on the Bitcoin Cash side. Again, they were thinking into the future, which we're now have seen kind of come to fruition. But if you rewind to that point in time, one of the big benefits to BTC was that there was that split over the future fees. But even at the time, even with the blocks full, it was still 10 cents or 5 cents. It was still a
Yeah,
low amount that for the things people were using Bitcoin for, that wasn't a
yeah,
key
yeah.
differentiating factor. It wasn't so painful that they had to
Exactly,
switch.
exactly. You had to understand, and I've seen many people told me, look, I didn't get it. I I didn't get it until I
Mm.
suffered it, and then I started to uh, go to the old forums and your posts, and I started to
Mm.
remember all the things you said. Now I get it, but this is the same as as we were talking about when people are faced between the a good sound money and fiat money. If they only know fiat money, they will not get it mm, just by listening to a perfect explanation of the
Mm.
flaws. They have to experience it. So many people had to experience $50 fees to understand that this was not, and then they started to ask, okay, are they working on
Mm.
this, or this is just the way it will be? No, no, it will be worse, they are saying, and they are cheering. So if this is the case, okay, I don't want to be part of this.
Yeah.
But most people most people behave that way, and this is something we should understand.
Yeah, that's right. And so the at that yeah, I don't know how much more that we could talk about this all day, right? But I just think for the listeners who are coming back to this, who maybe weren't there at the time, the key point to understand is that this was a key, like I've got here the phrase baptism of fire. That's the only way I can put it, where Bitcoin Cash came off the worst for wear in this huge, confluence of factors, um, but that ultimately it led to where we're at now and where I think we will be over the next couple of years. So we'll talk about that in a second. But this was this key moment where everything that followed afterwards was related to this, and we'll talk about that. So then in the next phase, which sort of flowed on from this, I've got 2017 to 2020 uh, is where the two go their separate ways, because up until that point, Bitcoin, like we said, was one community and everybody was on the same page and everybody was working towards the same thing. And so if people had debates, they could argue one way or another, but in the end of the day, everybody would get back to the same page, just naturally. But in this case, now it was two different things, and now people have the explicit choice. And when the currency splits in two, it can split in two, but there's no way to patch it up and put it back together. And so for the rest of time, effectively, BTC and BCH became different. And from this, initially they were quite close, but they have spread out over time as to what their goal is, what their community is, who their investors are, the technology, while very similar. At the base layer is slowly, you make a few additions to BTC, a few additions to BCH, change some stuff on BTC, change some stuff on BCH. And as time goes on, they're becoming less and less sort of compatible on every level, not just the technology level, but the community and the discussion that is being had and all these different ideas. And so because there was this split, BTC, like we said, benefited from the fact that it kind of had the momentum of retaining the brand name, and it then went through that bubble then and this bubble that we've had recently. But it had to sort of refashion its identity to being digital gold and selling this narrative of like being involved with the banks and stuff and not trading for pizza like you were saying. That all had to be thrown out because you just couldn't justify it with the fees. And so as a result of this, BCH was in the opposite crisis where it didn't have the brand name, but it did kind of have the idea of peer-to-peer cash. But then because it was a new community effectively, or a subsection, an excise section of the community, there was then a lot of battles over the next couple of years with Bitcoin SV and BCHA, and there's been these sort of different clashes as the community tries to find its own new way of doing things that is resistant to those problems that it had experienced so heavily. And well, we'll see in the next slide that it's kind of come out the other side of that, I believe, in a certain sense. But you just need to think about that after that 2017 point, there was essentially three things that happened. BTC had to rewire itself to be digital gold in its narrative and in its community. BCH had to establish itself as, okay, we're going to do peer-to-peer cash, and going back to the roots of the earlier principles of Satoshi and so on and so forth. And then also in the rest of the crypto market, there was a huge surge and innovation and more, Ethereum rose up to a lot of prominence, and all these other coins became much more in focus because of this titanic battle between BTC and BCH and the issues there. A lot of people just thought, right, well, that's obviously not going to work then if they're, melting down into chaos. So yeah, how have you found? And now this
Yeah,
is quite recent.
yeah.
How have you found this last couple of years?
Oh, I think that we are learning. Besides the why, why did these forks happen? I mean, what's the purpose? Who's behind it? I don't know, but I think that something good about this is that we are learning that not every fork is worth it. So if you have a small disagreement, it's better to have a small disagreement, a small conflict, and go on, because what we are building is so dependent on network effects that in the long term it will not matter. I mean, if it's the protocol is good enough, like it happened with the internet. If the protocol is good enough, people will find ways to solve problems. But the Bitcoin BTC protocol is not good enough, not even close. So it's not a technical thing that you have to solve. It's an economic impossibility. So once you understand that, that's why I said before, we understood that this was not going to work. That's crucial. And then what exactly you want to do with this? If you disagree about some little thing and you think that you can replace all the community, and you can just replicate the network effects, you're wrong. I mean, and you will be, you will prove. I think you will be proven wrong, more and more wrong with time, because that's the nature of the network effects. So I think that BCH, yeah, as you said, went through a lot of proof of fire. No, this fire test, or I don't know what, through a lot of fire.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of things were on fire. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
purified in a way
Exactly. Like I was saying about the
by
bushfires,
the
that was the biggest
yeah
and probably maybe the biggest there will ever be, right? I don't know. We'll
yeah
see. But I think,
yeah
yeah, now we have this sort of knowledge in the whole crypto space. It's not even just the Bitcoin Cash community, right? But until this point, there was no knowledge, So, like so many things in crypto, it was happening for the first time ever. So, we're learning as we go along. And at that time, people didn't really know how would a fork go. Would one of them just die off immediately? Would
yeah
like how would the miners react? All these different things. But now it's sort of a bit more known, and so people are understanding as a result of the Bitcoin Cash and then the Bitcoin SV and so on forks is that, like you said, that a fork is a method of last resort. It's something you want to have
yeah
if it is that critical, it's worth doing it. But
exactly
if it's not overwhelmingly critical that you should fight for over it,
yeah
then it's
and,
not worth doing.
and and it was
Yeah.
critical. I mean, we were fighting for the survival of the Satoshi Nakamoto idea
Exactly. Yeah.
system that he created. So this is, of course, this is
Mm.
critical.
But yeah, in the future, people are going to like if they want to fork off Bitcoin Cash, they can, and we'll see whether or not that does happen. But the ultimately they've got to have a very very strong case to
Of course,
to do so to have success. Yeah.
especially if the adoption keeps on growing, it will be almost impossible. People want to use the kind of money that other
Mm.
people use. Look at the peso, Argentinian peso. Why do people use? It's not just because they are forced to use
Mm.
pesos. It's because they know that other people will accept
Mm.
it. So it's like self
Yeah,
fulfilling in a way,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It is like self fulfilling and self reinforcing, and the way it is
self
now
enforcing. Yeah,
as well is that even to date, we're seeing some sort of early signs of that, but BCH still has not passed BTC, and Bitcoin SV has not passed BCH, right? So there's actually no recorded cases right now of a cryptocurrency that was in the minority coming back to overtake the lead one. So
hmm
I think this podcast has started, largely to track this journey that I think we're going to see, and there is now some evidence for that. But even if we do see that, it will be the first time ever because the network effect is so huge, and it will have taken the
Oh,
Bitcoin Cash
I don't think
community.
that it's that difficult because they are committing suicide. So it's
Yeah,
not. We just have to keep on existing.
indeed, but
It's not
in
that.
slow motion, right? Like this was a
Yeah,
four
yeah, yeah,
year, 5 year sort of project at the minimum, right? And
yeah.
maybe it will take 6, 7, 8 years. Which you want to,
Who knows? Sorry. I just little
yeah,
disagreement and I
yeah,
stop.
yeah, yeah. No,
you know, you never know with these things, and when people start realizing, it can go much faster than anyone uh, can
yeah,
imagine, because when people are always watching at each
mm,
other. No, so let's say you bought this narrative that Bitcoin is a store of value and every other thing is a
mm,
shitcoin. Bitcoin is BTC and nothing else, and it's a store of value that you shouldn't touch. First of all, at some point, uh, you will be proven wrong by just
mm,
reality, because you will not have mining, and it will not be
mm,
Bitcoin. It will not be protected by mining. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that perhaps you will not uh, understand it, but other people will understand it before
mm,
you, and they will change their mind, and they will put their money where their mind is. And if many people, especially big investors, start to do that, then all
they just
others
flock in.
start to
Yeah.
think maybe I'm in the wrong side of
Mm.
history. So they flock exactly. So I don't think this will be just a gradual thing. I think it might explode at some point. Nobody knows when, but this is
No,
what I think.
I agree with you on that. So when I was saying that it would be like a 5 or 6 years. I mean, if you take it from 2017, right? So we've already had 5 years.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm saying like maybe with 5 years of so this fork, this battle, it has been a five
Yeah.
year or a 6 year battle, but I agree it will end probably in 3 months or 6 months, or could be 1 week, right? It
It
could be where
yeah.
people
You
start
you
flipping.
don't. We don't know exactly when, but you will see the hockey
Yeah,
stick in the chart.
exactly.
I
The
think,
exponential will just kick
especially
off.
when they start to
Mm,
fear, that, oh yeah, these guys were right, or this might
mm.
happen.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to, well, I guess that's, let's move. This is the next slide, right? Is that in 2021, is this the year? Is it 2021 or maybe 2022? It's Things are starting to hit a tipping point, right? So, uh, to me, the world outside of all of this little infighting, the rest of the world is sort of starting to get the message that cryptocurrency is going to be huge and they can't ignore it any longer. I mean, it's always been growing exponentially, but like it's a hockey stick on a hockey stick, right? Which is that the
Yeah, yeah,
global population are cluing into this, and people that I was talking to for years and telling them, yeah, Bitcoin, blah blah blah, all this stuff, they're starting to listen to me, and I've made this podcast, and it's been growing like quite rapidly, and it's because that is the status in the world. So because you have that situation at the same time as BTC has fees that are now, it's been up to $50, $60 recently, but now it's still $20 or whatever. Like, it can't, any increase in growth just makes their problems worse, and there's no quick out,
yeah,
because if they try and change anything, it's just going to melt down into conflict in their own community. The
yeah,
alternatives
yeah.
already exist with Bitcoin Cash or with other cryptocurrencies as well. It's easier
And
to
also,
switch.
it's not easy to remove the
Yeah,
code, isn't it?
yeah, that's right. Replaced by
I
fee, and like SegWit, you cannot remove. So that's just locked in
Yeah,
stone.
exactly.
That's over and done with. There's no fix to that. And even some of the other stuff like that Bitcoin Cash has taken out, like replaced by fee, that's a and it's taken a long time to dig
Yeah,
all of that out of there. And so, on a technical level, on a community level, on an economic level, so many things that the BTC is, they've locked in their course, and they can't suddenly, maneuver in the market, right? And so we've seen, I think, the bottom of the, like we were talking about right from the start, 118 to 1. I think that was the bottom, and since then BTC has nearly like tripled up to
yeah, yeah. And the potential is there. I mean, with BTC, they destroy the potential to
mm,
grow. But this is, I think, for BCH, there's no. I mean, of course, there's material
mm,
limits, but in practical terms, we be comfortable with this hockey stick into a hockey stick.
yeah, exactly. And we might, see, yeah, like we're already, like doing about 1 megabyte blocks, or probably even like half a megabyte now that the transaction limit has been reduced by Noise.cash, but they're already on 32 megabyte blocks, is already on the network, and they're looking to 256 megabyte blocks because,
Yep.
again, the community is forward thinking in that way and prepared for, if there is that huge surge, we will just be able to onboard and onboard and onboard.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. Remember that 1 megabyte was seen when Satoshi put this limit, was seen as almost impossible to get.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And
It was,
having,
yeah,
way ahead. You've got to be forward thinking. You've got to be
yeah,
like, no engine. That's one thing that engineers do have, right? As much as we were ragging on them before, is you want to be
yeah,
ahead of the game. You want to have your capacity ready to go before people need it. All engineers will recognize that. Well, except for Bitcoin BTC
yeah.
engineers,
Well,
apparently, but
Satoshi, indeed, he realized that, and he explained exactly how to deal with that.
yeah. And so in this 2021, where BCH has been surging, and now as well Ethereum has been, absolutely like crushing it versus BTC, and slowly been rising up, so that BTC dominance of the market is now down to 44 or less percent. And so, it seems to me that I would expect in this year or in next year, or there will just be a couple of critical events. Like, I'm totally speculating here, but let's just say like if Elon Musk came out and said we're supporting Bitcoin Cash and I put $1 billion into that as well, like something like that, or it could be that
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
a certain government could melt down suddenly, right? Like some
yeah,
fiat economy could just implode and sort of like in Argentina, but maybe somewhere else in the world, and then people there for any reason start loving cryptocurrency or just any sort of event like that. Any tinderbox could strike it off, and then either
yeah, yeah,
Ethereum, along with sort of the rest of the market, kind of
yeah,
behind
yeah.
it, or
And I think
Bitcoin
that
Cash.
there's a distinction, important distinction between what happened with Ethereum and with Bitcoin Cash, because Ethereum got all the people that started to realize that these guys will not just will do whatever was in their hands to not allow Bitcoin to scale. They started, um, let's say, escaping
Mm.
the the Bitcoin BTC camp,
Yeah.
and they went where? Ethereum, but because there was nothing else, not because they thought, oh, this has a bright future.
Mm.
It's just like a refugee. Just go where you can and stay there, even if you don't understand. It's not that people thought, oh, yeah, smart contracts will be. I think maybe yes, some of them, but most people just uh, uh, see is just at that time could see that Bitcoin BTC was doomed, and they jumped to ETH. But now with BCH, we have the original. It's so people that jumped to BTC for the right reasons will jump and are jumping, I think, to BCH for the same reasons. It's not just whatever. I'm just escaping and I don't care where I go. It's just I don't want to be near these guys. It's no. This is again. This is your home.
Mm. Yeah, and I think there's two sort of dynamics in that. So one I think is as BCH starts to surge up, I think you're right that we will attract back a lot of people in the cryptocurrency who were from the early days and who then moved off into other coins or different things. If they see that it's starting to happen and it's you have to prove it very, you know, very like very decisively because those people they've been burned, they know they're going to be skeptical, right? Which is why it's very important that Bitcoin Cash is doing well, and as it continues to accelerate, hopefully it will have to win that very hard-earned trust back, and then people will flood into, and then that's a self-perpetuating thing. Like we've been saying, a lot of these things they build on themselves, but I think another aspect to it, in a similar way, is that if Ethereum or Dogecoin or any coins are surging against BTC, that creates in the world, not even just in the crypto space, but to everybody, the understanding that the narrative has been okay, Bitcoin is the king and that's the number one. But let's say if Ethereum did somehow, you know, move up, it only needs to go about 3x or so
Yeah,
and take over
yeah, yeah,
Bitcoin. Then, as the rest of the world is starting to wake up to cryptocurrency, they will also have to sort of divorce in their mind because to a lot of people who don't know the difference, they think
yeah,
Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, that's the same thing. They'll have to understand, okay, there are these
yeah.
different choices. And people who are uh, unaware of all this, they think that's a problem. They think, oh, but then people are not going to trust it even less because they don't know about Bitcoin and
Yeah,
anything, blah, blah. And that is somewhat true, but it's also really important, I think, because it forces people to understand this is a choice. With
exactly,
fiat
exactly.
currencies, you don't have a choice, so you just go with whatever. And then if the choice was fiat or Bitcoin, then you go, okay, all right. But then if it's fiat or these 100 other things, you have to switch your brain on. You can't just put your money into anything because it's forced research. Because otherwise, you're going to know that if you fuck it up, people know that was my fault. There was a lot of
Yeah.
cryptos. I could have picked any of them.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so having that skin in the game, as it were, the Nassim Taleb book that I've seen that everywhere. I read it recently, but a lot of people have been talking about that concept recently. um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
is
yeah, and
key.
also anti-fragility, also
Exactly.
another one of these his concepts.
Yeah, he's spot on. And with the whole crypto market, that just proves the philosophy right there, right? The
Yeah, yeah.
more resistance it gets, the more immune system it develops, like you were saying. So that's one, yeah, possibility. So I think finally, obviously we'll see in the future what will be the next phases of crypto. But one thing that I have found very interesting, as I've obviously had, this story or this narrative that that you are like largely agree with, right? We're on the same page here. This is the thinking in the Bitcoin Cash community, or the story of how history happened, and so on and so forth, which I'm telling in this podcast and spreading out to other people. But recently, because of these events with Bitcoin Cash surging against Bitcoin and so on and so forth, I thought, for the first time in a while, I don't do it very often. I thought, let me check in on what is going on in the BTC side. What are they thinking about? What is their analysis of this? Let's get the other side of the story. And so I listened to this podcast, speaking of Bitcoin, which was formerly called Let's Talk Bitcoin, which
Oh
is
yeah,
with
let's not Bitcoin.
with
Yeah,
Andreas Antonopoulos and a couple of other people.
yeah.
And so I listened to an episode of them. It's linked here on the slides. People can listen to that and make their own mind. But I was listening to that just last night, and I was blown away at it's like being in a different reality, hearing
Oh yeah,
them,
yeah.
their discussion of what's going on in their community. What are people thinking about? Because there's this technical topic which is big for them at the moment called Taproot, which is an idea of an upgrade that wants to be made in Bitcoin. And I don't know that in tremendous detail, so I can't really, for the listeners, I can't give them a good summary. But let's just say they want to make another upgrade somewhat similar to the one that led to the BTC and BCH split. And there's been some controversy amongst themselves as to how to manage that. And what that is preoccupying their focus is, how do we force the miners into doing things that we want them to do? And this sort of, oh, it's all going to be okay and everybody's going to have consensus, and ignore those people who are disputing it, and all those things. If you listen to this episode, you'll hear those um, vibes. And just I was expecting like that in a Bitcoin podcast you would say, look, BCH has tripled against us in the last uh, three, 2-3 months. Like the warning bells should be starting to ring,
Yeah,
but they're
yeah,
not. They're not. There's nothing like that. It's
yeah, yeah.
silence.
It's, it,
You know.
they don't have their they will have their Kodak moment, I think,
Yeah, that's
afterwards.
right. And I mean, I guess it is. Well, we'll see whether it it happens or it doesn't. But as Bitcoin Cash grows, at what point do the alarm bells start to ring for the BTC community? And I can
No,
see.
I think, yeah, many of these guys will say will go down with the ship.
Mm,
At least this will be their narrative. Oh, this is just,
temporary.
it didn't
Yeah,
work. This is this was the right one, but people were not ready for this. They will say all this bullshit. I think that this analogy is not perfect.
yeah,
I like it, but we should. I like it better if if the BTC brother is not just, but because you portray it as just a decision, no, different path, different life
yeah,
path. I don't think that's the case. I think that one of the brothers or the sister, I don't know, the
yeah,
brother was hijacked, was tortured, was brainwashed for
mm,
years, and that's the way he ended up that way. It's not. I mean, you cannot be that stupid. It's impossible to. And I'm sure Antonopoulos is not. I mean, he's a very smart guy, uh, and people like that. I I don't know, but I can't imagine how can you not note the difference between the original um, the original, let's say, plan and what how it turned out. It's, I mean, I just I don't believe that they don't get it. I don't know what do you think
Well,
about
I
that?
mean, so for the audio listeners, what we're talking about is on the slide. I had this analogy as I was listening to this podcast and trying to figure out how could the discussions be so isolated and so separate that I'm thinking of this big narrative of BCH versus BTC and everything like that, and in the Bitcoin community, there's no discussion of that. It's silence. It's not even like that it's people saying, "Oh, we don't need to worry about this." It's not even on the agenda. It's not being discussed at all. And I was mind blown. So I thought, okay, maybe Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, they're kind of like two siblings where if they were in the same household when they're very young, they're the same. You know, their parents give them the same clothes, they eat the same meals, they live in the same place or whatever. And then at some point, like the fork, they grow up, they become teenagers. You know, they start to fight a little bit. You know, one wants one wants something else. You know, and they start to be a little bit different and jockey with each other for position. And then obviously they've split off. And then as they become adults, as they grow up, then the the life paths diverge even further, right? And they become, in some families, siblings. They almost stop talking to each other, right? Things get so separate that they're finding their own way in the world and their own ideas, and they have their own friends, their own networks, their all these sort of different things. And the reason I like this analogy was because when it's not perfect, because at the start, the two siblings would be different. Maybe not if they were twins. I was thinking maybe there would be some sort of analogy like that. But uh, the thing is, those no matter how far those two siblings go, they will still always be family, like forever. And that could never be denied or changed or ultimately have repercussions. Like if one of them had a genetic disease from their parents, then maybe the other one would need to get tested for it, right? And it's in that same way where Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin have become these siblings that have grown apart as adults, increasingly so, but they're still linked by the miners. And so if there is a huge surge in BCH and it starts sucking mining power out of BTC, which it has happened, but just not to a critical extent yet. But because that has started happening, that is something that BTC will not be able to ignore, because their chain will melt down if they lose a big chunk of their
Will
hashing
not be
power.
able to
That's it.
yeah, to survive.
Yeah.
Not that's that's the end, the end of it.
Yeah, that's right. And so we're going to see, whether how things play out, or I don't know, maybe that's some helps some people how to think about. Maybe this is a way I'll explain in the future when people ask me about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. It's like two siblings from the same parents, as to how it kind of is going to play out. So I'm amazed that there's no discussion of this in the BTC community, but
Or it's not allowed.
yeah, well, that's right. It is. Yeah, exactly.
It's been forbidden for so many years that the only people that stay there is the people that just know what not to
Or
say.
they've been, yeah, or they came in past that point and they have never questioned it. In
Yeah,
hindsight,
yeah, which is not the case, of course, of
yeah,
Antonopoulos, but many others perhaps.
exactly. So yeah, we will see. But for the viewers who are listening to this, what did we say the date is today? It's the 9th of May 2021. But if you're listening to this, in 6 months, a year, or whatever, 5 years, you can see how did history play out. Because if Bitcoin Cash continues to grow, if it keeps surging, at some point it becomes a reality that cannot be ignored. Whether it's going to be at you know well, now it's 40 to 1, right? Whether if it was at 20 to 1 or at 10 to 1, probably like the alarm bells have got to go off. Like, I don't know, maybe at 5 to 1. But the more that it gains, the more likely it is that it goes to 1 to 1 and just completely destroys Bitcoin, right? So it's like you were saying before, it's just at what there's a tipping point at which just critically everybody just starts dumping one side and just switching over to the other.
Yeah. It's not just buying; it's dumping to
Yeah,
buy.
that's right. So everybody who switches, has a 2x effect because they sell on their
Yep.
BTC and they buy BCH, or maybe they buy
And
Ethereum or
they
something.
they
But
they
yeah,
want it.
they switch one to
They
the other.
they want the institutions. Well, they have the institutions, and that's a double-edged
Yeah,
sword.
exactly. Well, that's a huge point as well. Is that the Bitcoin community, I think they've said up until this point, it's very easy for them to say, yeah, we're with BTC all the way, we'll never sell it, digital gold, everything like that. But they've been lucky in that they haven't been tested on that, where they can say that and whatever, but their price has been going up, and it's also been going up relative to BCH. So it's very easy to say, haha, yeah, we won. But now, if the ratio flips around, the BCH community, they've already been tested on that. They've already passed this quiz, which is that anybody who has
Exactly.
BCH now, they bought it instead of buying BTC. They knew, okay, West, this is what I
Sorry,
want.
and
Yeah.
they bought BTC when it was going through the same shit
Yeah.
storm that BCH then had to suffer. So I mean, the early adopters are here. Roger Ver is not the only one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard for people to understand, but hopefully I'll have like yourself and other people, on this podcast, so that people can understand and kind of get that perspective. So yeah, I think that was a bit of a trip through. Well, we've got to have a long episode here, but I think that was a good trip through the cryptocurrency history. And yeah, I'll find a way to sort of maybe highlight this episode or something. Put it on my channel somewhere so that people can see if they want a summary. The story up to now. I think we did a good job of covering off a lot of that. So we've just got a couple of extra sections at the end here. So community comment of the week. So I try and find something in the community and bring it into the conversation. So in the theme of this week, somebody who is new to cryptocurrency said, right, so adopting Bitcoin Cash and abandoning Bitcoin altogether sounds a bit wild, but then again, anything could happen. We're talking about crypto. And Shadow Orson, who I think also is probably in this same vein on Reddit of being quite a long-time proponent, said, I think you're missing the point. Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin. There is a cognitive disconnect occurring. Bitcoin is currency, a cryptocurrency. Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Core, and others are all Bitcoin. Some are more Bitcoin than others. The dollar is a currency, a fiat currency, just as the Barbadian dollar, the Fijian dollar, the American dollar, the Australian dollar, I guess the Canadian dollar, the US dollar, the Hong Kong dollar, right? Some are more dollars than others, depending on where you're currently geographically located. And so this is kind of, like sort of similar to the siblings that I was talking about, is that all these things are in a class that they're all linked together, and the success of one at some will come at the cost to others. And so really it's the market playing out this kind of battle between them. And if Bitcoin Cash goes on a huge run, that will just suck all the life out of Bitcoin Core and probably the other forks too.
I think so. And also, this reminds me of the concept of moneyness, because
Exactly.
what this guy says, Bitcoin and others, some are more Bitcoin than others. Okay, what does it mean to be more Bitcoin? Okay, then you have to go and study the fundamentals.
Reading the white paper, how closely does it stick to that design? How closely is it implementable? How practical is it? How many people accept it?
And why it is the right design?
That's right. Yeah, and ultimately, that to me, this whole thing, that's why there's this huge debate about what is Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin, well, now you can say, okay, technically, or the name branding on it is, BTC, but Bitcoin Cash, to me, it is still Bitcoin, and in the long run, I think history will recognize it as Bitcoin, for that reason. We just have to be Bitcoin Cash for the time being, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
In the long run, in the long run, if I am right and we have this dominant currency, it will not matter how do you call it.
Everybody will just call it Bitcoin. Yeah. Okay. So then we've got this meme of the week from Alexander Huck, who tweeted on Twitter, the Bank of England governor says that cryptocurrency investors should be prepared to lose all of their money. And then it has the clown face emoji, and then has attached a graphic which is of the value of one British pound in 2019, but stretched back in history to 1209. I don't know why it would be that day. That was about the time of the Magna Carta, so maybe that's why that was.
Yeah, but this is the most successful of all fiat currencies. Let's remember
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Good point. So this is the strongest and probably one of the longest lasting
Yeah,
fiat currencies,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it has, so the graph basically, it starts at 2,000 pounds. So if you had £1 at that time, you could buy what we would now think of as about 2,000 pounds worth of stuff. Uh, and it's basically, it just declines in this huge thing over the centuries from 1209 down to 2019, where it's worth virtually like nothing, right? And so that trend of it just going to zero on a very long time scale is very, very obvious. So it is very ironic that people who have these currencies, and it's funny because you said that before, right? Is that people, that's another thing people don't understand. They complain about cryptocurrency volatility, and that's true, but cryptocurrency is volatile upwards generally.
Yeah,
It's up and it's down, but in the long run it goes up. And then fiat is the opposite. It's volatile but
yeah.
slower and downwards. And so
That's why
yeah.
people, perhaps people in London,
Mm,
uh, they they don't get it as well as people here in Buenos Aires,
exactly.
because they can feel it.
Mm. That's right, exactly. It's not the pain. It's
Yeah,
not digging into them, right? And they just don't have that experience. But some people, at least, you can understand if you intellectually understand and invest in cryptocurrencies in the long run, you get pretty well rewarded for it. So that is one good thing. All right, so last slide then, or second last slide, I guess. So yeah, we have this segment. I'm sure if you've listened to the other shows, you would know of the message to the community, where just can be unrelated to the topic we have or any topic, as to what you think the community needs to hear. And because obviously, like we've talked about, BSC and BCH split off and the community had to reform, and I think one way that we're going to come out ahead is by having a better community dialogue, by having a better flow of ideas around between everyone. So yeah, from your point of view, if you could talk, to the listeners on this show now or in the future, as they look back on these episodes, or they're trying to catch up or whatever, what do you think the community needs to hear?
you say, what do they need to hear? The truth. It's as easy as that. I don't think we have to make some. What they do, they try um, to sell something that is not there. So our job is easier in a way. I mean, we have to fight, but we have the truth on our side. So it's easier. It's not that we have to be lying and trying to hide the truth. No, no, we just have to turn on the lights. So this is and also when I say turn on the light, is act on your conviction. If you think this is important, go and talk to people, show them. Uh, don't think that for you. This is we are. This is. I think this is very important for people to realize that we are a privileged generation. Not every generation has have opportunities, um, and some people think that it's. I mean, extraordinary things cannot happen when they are alive for some reason. It's like they are. Um, they think that extraordinary things happened in the distant past and will not happen again. And I think they are wrong. And this is our moment to show that we we can have we can behave like adults. We are not children anymore. We are still children. We are looking up for some guide to decide what to do with our life in a very fundamental way. So we know we have the roadmap. Just we have to grow up. Now we can. So I can understand past didn't have the tools, but we have the tools. We have to use it. It would be uh, uh, not to um, take advantage of this tool.
Yeah, great. I absolutely agree that 100%. That's all it is people need to think for themselves, and we're at a turning point in history, and everybody can be a part of it. So I think it is absolutely crucial that everybody takes that seriously and sees it in that vein. It's very exciting. It's a great opportunity. Exactly like you said. So that pretty much wraps up the show then. As always, there will be the slides and resources will be at bitcoincashpodcast.com, and the videos are on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it with the slides and stuff. I realize that some of the audio listeners might not even know that. People can donate as always to the show. Thank you very much for all the donations. I really, really appreciate that. And do you have any shout outs for the show? Anything that you want to direct people to?
Let's say thanks so much. Thanks so much for what you do. It's been great. Please donate to this guy. I will.
Okay, all right. We'll see him.
He's doing an excellent job, seriously.
And my shout out for this week goes to Pat, who I was talking to a couple of days ago. He was on my door in the back. You can see here I had some problems with the handle, and he came in and helped me rescrew and fix the door mechanism. And so I was talking to him about money. He was talking about investing and everything. So I sent him a bit of BCH, and then he immediately sent it back. And he started telling me all this stuff about his, friend who was mining Ethereum and all that, and how he was getting into cryptocurrency and all that stuff. So I hope he's listening to this episode. He said he would be. So Pat, absolute legend, and welcome to the Bitcoin Cash community. So that will do it for this week. Until next time.
He pulled out his laptop and bring up the site. Looked at me and said, this will change your whole life. Then he started explaining the basics to me. The miners make money by taking a fee every time a transaction is made and complete, and they work every minute and day of the week. A guy named Satoshi created this all. He's the mastermind of it, the brain and the balls. There's a lot more to say, but before I begin, just tell me right now if you're out or you're in.